Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt. I'm a wildlife photographer based in New England. And last week we talked about mindful photography and my journey discovering it during the last couple years. And this week I just wanted to share with you 7 top tips for doing mindful photography in the field. So let's get into it. So I have a list here and I'll just go through it. The first one is choose an immersive environment. I keep coming back to nature or urban environments. Both of these are environments where you are immersed in sensory experiences. And the goal is to be in an environment where we have enough information to process that it gives our brains enough to focus on, that we can focus on that and ignore the other stuff that's going on in our lives. The second point is, I think it makes sense to take a photo walk as opposed to staying stationary. Now, I absolutely can see the argument for picking a street corner or a wildlife hide and setting up shop and just observing outward in that environment. And I think that's probably a form of mindful photography without question. But I also know from my own research and many others that walking and physical activity can be healthful as well, both from a physiological perspective, like improving our cardiac or respiratory health, or even just reducing all-cause mortality, to also improving mental health. So why not get a win-win here and be physically active walking about while engaging in the mindful activity? So I say combine it with a photo walk if you can. The third one is that we know Greenspace also separately can be very helpful. So there's a whole set of research around Greenspace and nature bathing, as it's known as a term of art in Asian cultures. But the presence or the ability to spend time in a natural environment, forgetting photography for a second, can be very healthful. So when we incorporate that, interacting again, just like with walking, with photography, I think there's probably another win-win there. So it makes sense to me to spend time in nature if that's what you're into. But I also want to make a point that I found street photography, which I've recently picked up. I recently got a Fuji X-T30, which I'll do another video on. I've been taking a lot of black and white street photography. And I found that to be really equally calming and a nice meditative experience. So I don't think you need to be in Greenspace to benefit from this type of photography. Okay, this is an important one. The fourth point is to turn off distractions. And here I'm really talking about phones. Put your phone in airplane mode, and honestly, my advice would be put it in a bag or somewhere where you're not going to even feel it on your person, like in a pocket, for example, where you might feel it. I think we're so into rapid response and being on our phones all the time that we're not even thinking about it anymore. And it's so easy to pick up that phone, and even just physically feeling the phone in your hand or feeling it in your pocket, it can take you to a place that you don't want to be, where you're thinking about deadlines or social media or whatever. So I think get rid of the phone, put it in airplane mode, put it in a bag, and just ignore it for the time that you're out taking a meditative photo walk. The fifth point is to wander. Choose a spot, but wander in that spot. Again, with phones, if we're going with a direction, we're trying to go to a certain neighborhood or to a certain spot, there's a tendency to pick up your phone and look at Google Maps or try to navigate. And just wandering is, again, just removing that need or that desire to connect with technology and to route your path. So wandering can help address that. 6 is avoid critiquing your images. And I think this is hard, actually, as a photographer, because I want to look at my photo and I want to critique it. But I've actually tried to not even look at the photo review. I don't look at the photo after I took it, because the point is to be present in the environment and taking pictures, not caught up in my head about whether or not I executed that picture properly or what people are going to think about it. And we live in an era of digital space being very inexpensive. So from my perspective, use up a card, just take photos of whatever you see interesting and look at them later when you're back home. But enjoy the experience of taking the picture and be present in that moment, not reviewing it. I wanted to talk about gear. So number 7 is gear. And the idea here is, from my perspective, is you want to know your gear so that you're not spending time fiddling with settings or playing around with certain aspects of the gear when you're taking pictures. Again, it's about focusing on the experience of being in the environment and taking pictures, not with your technology. So to the extent that the camera and lens combination you choose is familiar enough that it becomes almost an extension of your eye and not part of, not a challenge, I think is really important for bridging that gap between you, the photographer, and your environment. And the final thing is, on gear, I do think it's possible to use an iPhone. So some of us may not have access to a DSLR, and given iPhones, pull us into that digital world, there's a risk there. But I think because iPhones or phones in general are so familiar from a camera perspective, they're so easy to access, the user experience is so simple, I think a phone could actually be a really great mindful photography tool. But what I would do is shut it off, like put it on airplane mode and try to will yourself to not turn it off airplane mode during the photo walk, because there is this risk, as I mentioned before, that you get pulled back in to the digital world at a time when you really want to be present in your environment wherever you're taking your meditative photo walk. So I don't mean to be too prescriptive, but those are the ideas, those are the things that I jotted down that have worked for me and kind of my revelations as I take a step back.